Hello everybody, this is Carmen Killed the Cat, and welcome to your 8th C++ tutorial. In this tutorial, we will be learning about functions. So let's get started. We'll be using the text game from last time, and notice I took away using namespace std and added standard : here. It's just good practice to use this. Don't get in the habit of using namespace std. It will come back to haunt you in the future. So if you really want to use it for now, you can, but don't get in the habit of using it. So now onto functions. To declare a function, there are three parts. So we can see here, we have int, because main is a function. We have int. This is the return value. So for the function we're going to create, we don't want a return value. So we type in void. And I'll get into what return values are later. But for now, just type in void. And we're going to then we name the function. So let's call this text game. And what this function is going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste the code from main into this function, just so you see how to declare and define a function. And then we have open and close parentheses, and then a semicolon. Now in these parentheses, you put in the parameters for the function, but this function doesn't have any, so for now we're not going to put any in. So now the function is declared, and notice that it's not inside int main. You can't do it inside int main. It has to be above int main and below the includes. So then below int main, we define the function. So we type in void again, and the name of the function, and then open and close parentheses, and then no semicolon. Don't put a semicolon when you're defining the function. So now just to see how this works, we will cut and paste everything except return 0 from int main and put it all in here. And then to run a function, you just type in text game and then open and close parentheses, and you put the parameters in here. Notice that we don't have the return value here because we're not creating a function, we're running it. So the function's already created when we're running it, so we don't need to tell it that it has a void return value because it already knows that. So if we build this and run it, it should work just like the last tutorial. Let's just put in letters for this, A, and that's all. It's a text game from last tutorial. So now let's get into function parameters. So let's delete all this. We don't need it anymore. Bye-bye text game. Save it somewhere else before you delete it, because it's your first game. So now let's make a new function, and we're going to call this, again, it's going to be void return value, and we're going to call this add. And in the parameters, we're going to have int, let's call it num1, comma, space, int, num2, and then semicolon. So these are the parameters for the function, and when we define the function, we have to write them again. So void add int num1, int num, I have to put a space there, num2. And then we have our curly brackets. So what parameters are is they're variables that you put into the function that changes how the function runs, kind of. So you may have been able to guess the add function will be adding these two numbers. So we'll say sum equals num1 plus num2. Semicolon, and then we'll just output this value. Count sum and end line. And then we'll run this from the main function. So we'll do add, and then we can put in any two numbers. So let's say 1 and 10, and then semicolon. So now we build this. Sum has to be an int. So, yep, that works now. So now it's succeeded. So what we're doing is we're saying add, and we're passing in the parameters 1 and 10. So those parameters go into the function, and so num1 is 1, num2 is 10. So then it's adding 1 and 10, and then it's going to output that. So let's run it. 11. So those are parameters. We can add any two numbers, 2 and 10. We have to recompile it every time, unfortunately. 12, 2 and 100, 102. So now let's move on to return types. So to give a function a return type, you just put the name of the type you want to be returned, and it has to match up in the declaration with the definition. So it has to match up here and here, where you declare the function, where you actually define the function. And notice that main has the integer return type, and then we have return 0 here. So if we just delete this, then we do return sum. So what the return type is it's kind of what the function is giving back when it's called. So let's say int sum equal, actually let's not name it sum because that's something for later in the tutorial. Int number equals add 2 and 100. So, and then let's just output the number from here. So let's run this. We get the exact same output as if we outputted the number from the add function. So you may be wondering why we set number to add and then return sum. So you set number to sum in the main function, and then we output number. You may be wondering why we don't just output sum from the main function, because it's made here, so, and then we call the function, so sum, you should be able to just output sum. But that leads us into the problem of variable scope. So what variable scope is it's where a certain variable exists in your program. So since the variable sum is declared in the add function, it only exists within the add function. And a little trick for knowing the scope of a variable, these curly brackets are actually called scope operators, and anything within these curly brackets can only be accessed within those curly brackets. So we can't access sum from this line, we can't access sum from main, we can't access it from anywhere but within these two curly brackets, which is the function sum. So that is why we return sum and then set it to number. Now if we wanted, we could make sum global. So we just take the int off here and put semicolon there. And if a variable is declared outside any function, so just where we declared the add function and where we put our includes in, if it's declared here, it can be accessed by the whole program. But you generally don't want to have too many variables that are global, because then in bigger programs you may have two functions that need to have the same variable name, and then if you just have global variables, they can't have the same name. So just try to keep variables as local as possible. Need to put in here again. So we're going to get into one more thing in this tutorial, and that is overloading a function. So the add function takes in two ints, but say we wanted to add two numbers that were floats, so 2.5 and 100.1. Now this will probably compile. It will, but it'll only output 102, because if you try to pass in a floating point value to a function that takes ints, it just chops off the decimal place. So, but say we want to add two floats, then we go down here and we do int add. So we have the same function name, and then we'll do, say, double num1 double num2. And we actually want to make the return value a double as well. So these functions have the same name, so you would think that that would create an error, but since they have different variable parameters, it's what's called overloading the function. So now let's define it. We can actually just copy and paste this and make a few changes. Control C and Control V. So then we just change this to double. and we change this to double, and we change this to double, and we change this to double. So now, if we build this, it's still outputting 102 for some reason. 1 second. Alright, so I just made a dumb mistake. I forgot to change number to a double. So now let's run this again. 102.6. So that's all for this tutorial. Now you know about functions finally. You know how to return values. You know how to pass in values to a function. And you know why we have to return 0 at the end of the main function. And you know why int main is declared like this. So I highly recommend that you make some more functions, like make a subtract function, make a multiply function. If you don't know, this is the multiply operator. Make a divide function. This is the dividing operator. And make a squaring operator, or a power of operator, or power of function. That's the power of operator. So try making those functions and just make more functions. Play around with it. This is a pretty big topic, and we'll be getting more into it in the next tutorial and really forever. So play around with it. Make sure you understand the basics we've gone over so far. So see you in the next tutorial.